Welcome back to the Buffalo Reformed Podcast. We are a collective of Reformed Christians who meet monthly to discuss theology, culture, politics, and education. I'm your host, Aaron Masters. I am a pastor at Covenant Reformed Church in Western New York. This podcast exists to connect and encourage like-minded brothers and sisters in Western New York as we work to see this region won for Christ. We encourage our listeners to seek this goal by being devoted to Christ, to their family, to their community, and to their local church. In this episode, I continue my conversation with John Cooper. John is the executive director of the Niagara Gospel Mission in Niagara Falls, New York. He holds a bachelor's degree in pastoral ministry from Clark's Summit University and is working toward a Master of Divinity with an emphasis in leadership at Liberty University. During John's military career, he was deployed to Afghanistan, which forced him to wrestle with difficult questions about the Christian in the military. This led John to write the Warfighter's Catechism. John and an Air Force chaplain, Matthew Bryant, co-authored this book to be a resource for Christians who find themselves in combat roles in the military. It answers questions such as, does the Bible address war and warfighting? How can the Christian warfighter love his enemy, yet kill him? How can a warfighter lead in combat while demonstrating Christ-likeness? How do I know if the cause I am fighting for is just? Should women serve in combat roles? The Catechism answers 116 questions and includes excerpts from Oliver Cromwell's Soldier's Catechism. Before jumping into a discussion about the Catechism, the episode begins with a continuation of last episode's discussion on homelessness and parachurch ministry. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Buffalo Reformed Podcast.
Yeah, so in the book, Spurgeon and the Poor, which is a book out of Reformation Heritage Books. I think Alex DePrima is the author. I may have gotten that wrong, so sorry, Alex. Not that he knows who I am. But I did send him a message on Facebook, so we're Facebook bros. But so in that book, he makes the contention that the Reformed community has kind of hopped out of the space of poverty alleviation ministry, and one of the reasons that he believes that is because a lot of Reformed Christians are very afraid to be called, like a prosperity gospel or a more charismatic, because it is owned mainly by charismatic Christians, this space, and so his contention is that in a not wanting to be labeled as such, the Reformed community has pulled back.
So are they thinking that because we're saying that, listen, if you give your life to Jesus Christ and you obey his laws, this will have tangible benefits in your life, that could be labeled as?
Some of that, and then also some of the just going and actually helping the poor. It's something that soup kitchens and homeless ministries are typically... I know this for a fact because I work with these people. They're mainly either charismatic or even squishy.
So we're talking like Tim Keller.
Probably even worse, right?
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah.
At least Tim Keller, was reformed into soteriology.
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, we're talking about like, prayer meetings where people bark like dogs to get people to receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. Like, I mean, that's a lot. Or the whole I'm going to totally butcher the guy's name, but not properly quoting Francis of Assisi, who said,
St. Francis of Assisi, yes.
Who said, let's just show them the gospel by our works, not our words, which is not what his whole quote was, right? So, because he goes on later in that oration to say, like, we need to preach the gospel. So
interesting.
All I had to say that there's a fear from a lot of Reformed Christians to focus on that. We are so local church focused, which is good, that we forget that there are good ways and proper ways to do parachurch ministry.
Right.
But because we have seen parachurch ministry done so poorly, we're so afraid to hop in and do it. And so
Yes.
all the point of the book, his book is, look, there's not a Reformed person out there who doesn't like Charles Spurgeon, right?
Yeah.
And he uses Charles Spurgeon, who sat on the board of 66 benevolent ministries.
Yeah.
And not only, everyone knows about his orphanages, but very few people know that he actually would start a homeless ministry, see 40 people saved, and then they would start a local church out of that.
Wow.
And he would jump and do that throughout London.
Yeah.
And so, like, this is something that he tries to bring up as like a, look,
Yes.
we need to be doing this, and we can't be afraid to minister to the poor because of what people might think of us.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I'm sure that there are people who, when they see that I work in a homeless ministry and they have no idea about anything about me, they probably just assume, like, oh, John's probably just like he's a Christian, but he concerned more about doing good and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Versus, no, we have very strong theological beliefs, and
Yeah.
we hold to them, and we have a vision for not just homeless, but for the city. And,
Yeah.
and it's, you can get so wrapped up in like, well, now I need to go to a Reformed seminary to show people that I'm Reformed.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, no one cares. We're going to share the gospel. We're gonna see people saved, and if people don't want to hop on board with that, good
Yes.
riddance.
I feel like not Tim Keller, Joe Rogan right now. I'm just feeling like,
Oh,
it's so crazy to me. So crazy to me that, seriously though, it's crazy to me that Reformed Christians, so concerned about true doctrine and how to obey God, are the ones that are really ultimately not concerning themselves with ministering to these people.
yeah.
It's like we've erected an idol of credibility or respectability.
That's- Yep, and that's what it is. We love the ivory tower. We love saying where we went to seminary and what the last 3 books we read were.
right.
And if there isn't a Puritan in those last 3 books, heaven forbid. Right. And so
Right.
we're so concerned about that we forget that there's an actual war going on around us. And I liken it to, I could tell you, I know people who I'll go to their house and they'll show me their latest weapon that they bought. And they can tell me every spec about that weapon.
Yeah.
And they can tell me exactly how much gunpowder is in the cartridge shell, and they can tell me everything. But, and as we're about to get into, like, my job in the military was a sniper. I can't tell you everything about every weapon system that I even used, right? And at the time I could, but it's just kind of been doing other stuff. I don't remember that stuff
It's
anymore.
not your day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, but I could hit a target past a mile.
Yeah.
And that was because I knew how to shoot. It was because I purposed, to train myself on how to do that. So
Right.
to me, what we can do is we can study weapons so much that we forget how to use the weapons. I remember this quick story. We were talking to my wife's family, and one of her relatives was like 20 guns or something like that. But he was grossly overweight, and he didn't have really any ammo. So I said to him, I was like, look, I'm not telling you what to spend your money on. It's your money. However, I said, there are three fundamentals of combat, and that's shoot, move, and communicate. I said, you may be able to shoot, but you can't move.
Yeah.
And I said, and if the ATF comes and raids your house, like, you get 3 shots off. That's it. And then when the stress is induced and you haven't trained stress inoculation in your training to be able to shoot, like, you're going to die because you're going to miss the first 2 shots. They're going to know where you are. You might get lucky on your 3rd shot, but they're going to dome piece you. And you have no idea what happened. So your 20 guns now get given to the government. You should have just had 5 guns in different categories and bought ammo.
Right.
And had a couple friends that live near you that if you get attacked, you can now say, hey, let's come and do this. So
Yeah. So what you're saying is that we're so enamored with the weapons, we don't know how to use them.
correct. Yeah, correct.
I was going to, if we were going to jump into a different area, it would be that these people are so enamored with things that don't really matter. It's like, so practically, how much you know about the weapon doesn't matter. What matters is, can you operate it when you need to?
I mean, it's good to know the stuff.
It's good to know the stuff.
Yeah.
We need people who do know the stuff.
You need the cycle of function, for instance, because if you have a malfunction in your weapon system, if you know the cycle of function, you can find out where that malfunction is.
Right.
So the knowledge is good. It's good to know how much every bullet weighs. Why? Because now I know how much I'm going to be weighed down on an operation by how much ammunition I have to carry with me. So
That's right. Yeah.
there is, but if that's all I do, and I don't actually go to war and shoot bad guys, right, or at least be willing to do that and stand my post, then what is the point of all the study?
Exactly.
There is no point. So.
Yeah, and so then this gets to the next, the segue here. You have a focus on veterans at the mission. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there have been, and probably are continuing veteran programs that are specifically designed for veterans.
Yeah.
You've also done events that are like your rucking that you do to raise awareness for veterans. And then you also published this Warfighter's Catechism. So can you maybe walk through what some of the programs are, and even though it might be obvious, why you have that focus? And then the Warfighter Catechism, what prompted you to write it, how should it rightly be used, and we can jump into that specifically when we get there.
Yeah, so our programs, we have what's called the Liberty Suite, which is a specific veterans shelter. That is 6 beds specifically for veterans. So our overnight shelter is 24 beds. About 15% of all of our clients or guest residents, program participants, however you want to say it, they are veterans themselves. Mm-hmm. So because we have this specific veteran shelter, we have become kind of the go-to place in the Buffalo Niagara region for homeless vets, which is plan well worked, right? So,
yes.
And a lot of that has to do with my background. Like I said, getting out of the military and losing everything and really facing homelessness. If I didn't have the relationships, so the recon program is built upon things I learned that kept me from being on the street, right?
Yes.
And so, but a veteran who doesn't have that, he ends up homeless and really wondering why a country he served allowed him to be homeless versus saying, how did I get myself here, right? And so the Liberty Suite is that what we are building is our goal, it'll be a few years till we get there, but our goal is to be the #1 recovery center in all of Western New York, to include Rochester, Syracuse, for veterans. Right now, we are developing what's called the recon program, we have the recon program, the redeploy program, which will be basically a veteran walking through stuff that's already happening at the mission, but with a veteran focus through other support groups and events and things that we do. And so I am in the process of writing all of that programming and then hiring a director for that to walk a homeless person from, I'm homeless from I'm homeless, I have no hope, I'm about to shoot myself in the face, to because of Jesus Christ, I am thriving, plugged into a local church, have a good community, and I'm a functioning, not just member, but leader in my society.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. And now, as I said, it's probably obvious, but why do you care so much about veterans?
Well, we care for our own, right? So, like I said, my experiences coupled with I spent 6 years of my life fighting with brothers by my side. And a story, the first friend I had who committed suicide, which I've had about 8 in my time so far, and he committed suicide because he found himself without employment, couldn't figure out a way to provide for his family. So in his mind, because as an infantryman, everything surrounds death, in his mind, the only way I could provide for my family is to get the $400,000 worth of life insurance and shoot myself. And because he was facing homelessness. And so because of that experience, I've had a driving passion for homeless veterans, and we can't prevent everyone from taking that path,
Yes.
but we can hopefully interdict and help some.
That's really good. So then you also wrote up this, I don't know if you want to cut that or...
I do.
Okay, yeah.
I forgot.
Well, he's lighting up his incense for the body. I'm going to introduce this.
Holy smokes.
I think it was Michael Knowles. He said in an interview, the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and it needs its incense.
There we go.
And I'm like, that's actually pretty beautiful. So you recently published this Warfighters, the Warfighter's Catechism, it's called. And I remember when you were working on it, and you were actually working on it, I would say, at a very timely, it was a very apropos time, especially given where things have gone politically for us. So what does God's word say about war and, I guess, rules of engagement, for lack of a better term, how a person should be thinking about enlisting in the military, maybe having a career in the military, particularly, though, those areas of the military which would require violence, fighting. So you and Matthew Bryant put together this catechism. So can you just walk through, like, what led you guys to write it, and what were you seeking to accomplish by writing it? And then maybe we can jump into some of the things that it actually says.
Yeah, so fortunate aspect of my life was that I was able to graduate from Bible college. And so having a solid basis for understanding how to study the scriptures and knowing what the Word of God says before not going as an officer, but going in as an enlistedman. And as you said, 3% of the population are veterans.
Wow.
And of that 3%, I believe, and I could be wrong on this stat, but I believe it's only 5% whose job it is to carry a gun and engage the enemy, and only 1% of the military that is infantry. Now, an infantryman is a man who we always joked, like, they don't make movies about people who are in infantry. So, like, the guy who's walking around with a gun, who is in the trench, in the foxhole, holding ground or seizing ground, that is an infantryman. The guy who's got a rucksack on his back that's 100 pounds and walking around waiting to get shot at, that's an infantryman. Cavalry is in vehicles. You have your tanks. You have all that stuff too, artillery. But they are all there to support the infantry. And so my background is such. And what led to this really was I had thought these things through before joining. Not everything in the book, but thought a lot of it through. Is this something that a Christian should engage in? The actual act of shooting people.
I think that's a pretty common question.
It is, yes. And you can say yes, and many people have told me yes, but when I say why, give me the scriptural proof, it was always the same, which was, well, David did it. And it's like, well, as much as that is a good answer, like, David also slept with Bathsheba.
Right. Yes.
So, like, and danced around naked, which I've done too, but that's, but, is that a good enough reason to join the military just because King David did it, right? Or Joshua, or what do we see? Because then people will say, well, we don't see anything in the New Testament about it, which isn't true. But those were conversations that I had before entering. I did my own study and had justified it in my mind good enough to say, yeah, I'm down with this. So I joined the infantry. like I said, I went to the 25th Infantry Division out in Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. And I got put in what's called a Delta Company. Now, a Delta Company in a light infantry unit is basically the heavy machine gunners. And a lot of what we did was we drove in these light armored Humvees, and we would go with 50 cals, and while the rest of the infantrymen raided the city, we would be there as machine gun support. And I said to myself, this is not really what I want to do. I want to be the guy who kicks in the door. Like, that's what I wanted to be. But I was, this is maybe a little longer story than it needs to be, but I was swimming, and I saw an advertisement at the base pool for the reconnaissance commandos. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I want to be one, right? So, famous last words, right? So,
yes. Isn't it true that one of the Army or the Ranger mottos is you keep your eyes open, your mouth shut, and you don't volunteer for anything?
That is an Army motto.
Okay,
but
yeah.
I wasn't smart enough for that. So, so I just said, I was like, I want to do that. Like, and of course they got pictures of guys jumping out of helicopters. They got the guy in the ghillie suit with the sniper rifle.
They know how to appeal to that.
Oh, exactly. They're like, what would get John Cooper here? This would do it. So I tried out. And at the end of the trial, it was a week of just grueling week of weapons training, patrols, no sleep, no food, just the whole night. Walking, within a week, I think we walked like 60 to 70 miles. I mean, just like that kind of stuff. And no food with heavy packs. You name it, we did it, right? So I get there at the end of the week, and now we had to do a board. So we got to get 3 hours of sleep. So we're all like, yes. We get 3 hours sleep. Then we had to be in our best uniform. I'm a private, mind you. And then we have to go and sit in front of a bunch of NCOs and a bunch of officers, or they then break down our performance and then get to ask us questions. So I didn't perform, I wasn't the best guy there. I wasn't the worst guy there. I was kind of middle of the road. And they go through my performance. But on my enlisted record brief, I think it's called something different now, but on my ERB, it said bachelor's degree from Baptist Bible College. So they asked me, they're like, you went to Bible college? I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, why are you here? Why aren't you a chaplain? I was like, number one, you got to get an MDiv, but they didn't know what that meant. So I just said, I was like, well, I'm here. This is a job I want to do. I told him my eventual goal is to be a chaplain, but I wanted to go the infantry, so I understood what the regular soldier went through before pursuing that route. And then an NCO who had, probably, I think it was like 6 deployments between Iraq and Afghanistan, had done this job for a long time. He says to me, he's like, well, what do you want to do while you're here? I said, well, I'd like to, I'm going to do whatever I'm told, but I'd like to be a sniper in this unit. And he said, which eventually I would do. And he said to me, he goes, well, how are you going to shoot someone in the face and love your enemy? And I was then able to go into explanations of what I would call a proper view of Romans 13, going into David himself, and really my, at the time, limited looking into this topic. And I got into like an apologetics argument for the next half hour with a bunch of people who decide my fate, right?
Wow.
And so sitting there like this, I had to answer all these questions with a straight face, looking straight forward, and I couldn't do the whole like upward thinking thing, which limited my small brain capacity as it is. So I was faced with having to answer these questions. So I did, ended up making the unit. Another NCO came up to me and he said, I've been a Christian for a long time. And he said, I have never seen anyone be able to defend why we do it. And he said, to be honest with you, I've never thought about why we do it. I just knew it's what I should do. And he was told, my pastor told me that sometimes you have to do a dirty job. We don't understand. The Bible doesn't say why, but kind of like put your faith on hold and go do it for the country. But then I find out that wasn't just him. That was a lot of people who grew up in small town churches.
Yeah.
And the pastors were woefully unequipped to answer these questions that really have been answered for a very long time.
Yes.
But they, in their, and again, I don't want to be too critical, but they, in their day-to-day, they haven't had to face these questions.
Right.
And so when some young guy, 18 years old, joins in 1995, well, we're not at war. We're never going to go to war again, because we showed in Desert Storm that we just dominate everything. So we'll never be in war again. Oh, yeah, join. Get your free college. Do whatever until there's a war. And then pastors then, instead of taking time to study the scripture, said, well, just join. There's a chaplain probably in there who will help you out. Well, only 10% of chaplains are good. So then you get, so really there's two extremes. There's the one extreme that says, don't join the military because Jesus says, love your enemy. It's impossible to love someone and kill them, which is wrong. Then there's the other extreme that says, look, man, it's like penitentiary warfare, where it's like, look, your service to your country is kind of like a service to God, and your salvation is because you're fighting in war. Yeah. Of course, they'd never say that.
No.
But they've wrapped their Bible in an American flag, and they don't open their Bible anymore. They just look at the red, white, and blue on it.
That's so interesting because that's similar to some of the rhetoric that was used during the Crusades. Mm-hmm. It was more of like a religious pilgrimage. So the fact that they were going to war for this good cause was tied to their actual religious experience, their Christianity.
Yeah, and I would say some of it is sanctifying.
Right.
In the sense that what God created you to do, you're doing to his glory. So someone like me, I firmly believe God created me to be a warrior. Right now, that war is in the streets of America, but at the time, it was in the streets of Afghanistan, and I firmly believe that God created me to do that. I found pleasure in serving him in that way, but by no means is it justifying. Is it justification?
Yes.
Or glorification, which is what a lot of churches across America have made it.
Yeah, you're acting as, Romans 13, the servant of the Lord in executing justice. You're punishing evil and praising what is good, or it should be. But where it becomes problematic is when statements like you have to put your faith on hold are stated, because that should never happen.
No.
And also where America and service to America, or any nation for that matter, is equated with service to Christ or his church. Mm-hmm. You are serving Christ because he's king over all the earth. And so even the United States government is his servant. And so in that sense, you are serving Christ.
One of my nicknames, because of teaching on this with soldiers, was the deacon of death, because that was what I said we are. Like, as the frontline infantrymen, the ones who put down the bad guys, or call the artillery to tell them where to put down the bad guys.
Yes.
We are deacons, servants of God, and our service to God is putting evil people to death, within the proper bounds.
Right.
Because I can't just go around running around Niagara Falls shooting people who are bad. That's not what God's ordained.
Yes.
He's ordained the policemen and the military to do that.
That's right. Now, just as a quick rabbit trail, 71 Christians were beheaded recently. I can't remember which country it was that this happened. It was just recently in the news. But that's the kind of thing that I think would justify military action. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and think about this. So in the Crusades, I've done some study in the Crusades, and in the Crusades, people were going on these pilgrimages, and they were coming back saying, like, my relatives are being raped when I go there by these Muslims. There were Muslims who were circumcising adults by chopping off their whole member, as the King James would say, and letting the blood run through the baptismal fonts, and then baptizing babies in the blood of their fellow parishioners before killing the babies, raping nuns, raping men, raping priests. And so when we say that when we look at the Crusades and see that the Pope at the time, Pope Urban, said, we need to raise up an army here to stop this. And he went to governments to do so.
Right.
He didn't just raise up a Catholic army. Like, he went to governments and asked them to raise up their own armies. And men like Godfrey, who were like, I've been begging for this for 20 years.
Right. Yes.
Finally had his opportunity to go. And, by the way, debated the Eastern Orthodox on his way through to Jerusalem, which is pretty interesting when you read about it. Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff that I didn't think about till I was in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And I saw the same sort of atrocities done by the Taliban and by ISIS, and said, these people deserve to die. And we can go into the legitimacy of when do you deploy, and that was what my research on the Crusades were for a paper in seminary. When does a Christian nation deploy to help another Christian nation? However, the fact you're at war, like people doing that kind of stuff, beheading 71 Christians, and you have a ship full of Marines right off the coast. I mean, I think you should deploy. You should let those Marines do. If you polled those Marines and asked them what they want to do, I could tell you every single one of them saying, "Let's get after it."
Yeah, yeah.
But the government, needs to. And there's not a right or wrong answer. You should go. You shouldn't go. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yes. That
leaders have to be sitting under the preaching of the word, to, as George Washington made all of his officers do.
Yes.
To have wisdom in these situations.
Yes. Yeah, and I just want to clarify too, it's not just because it was Christians that were beheaded.
Correct. It'd be anyone.
It would be anyone that is unjustly being killed, tortured, abused. The role of the government is to restrain evil, and it is evil for people who call themselves Christian people to unjustly kill Muslim people, and it's just as atrocious for vice versa to happen. And the arm of the government, as God's arm of justice, ought to rain down justice on either of those situations.
Correct. And then the trouble is when it's not happening in your country.
Right.
Then
right.
What do you do? And those are conversations that could go on for hours. But
yes.
The fact that if you're there and you see things and you're told not to pull the trigger, which has happened to me, it haunts you every day.
Yes.
Because you're ordered not to stop evil and not to do what God's designed you to do.
Right.
And you have to follow those orders, or you're going to be in Leavenworth for the next 30 years, right?
Yes. Well, so I think that does paint a pretty good picture of the opaque situation for people that are going into the military in terms of just trying to morally prioritize how one of the 10 commandments, the 6th commandment, which says thou shalt not kill, doesn't apply, or maybe it does, in the context of war. But even as we alluded to already with what you're saying about that verse in Ephesians, where Paul's saying, if you're stealing, you need to stop, and you actually need to go to work so that you have something to give. And what he's emphasizing there is the positive aspect of the law. And so when the law says, thou shalt not kill, the Westminster divines, the people who wrote the Westminster Confession, took that to mean, not only does that mean you're not killing, but that also means that you are not only not doing things that lead to death, but you're also doing things that promote life. And so part of that would be removing people who are causing death, and also restraining people who are causing death. And we need people who are willing to do that.
Yeah, and it's as early as Genesis 9. Verse 6, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. So there's the verse right there, right after the flood was the first thing that says, look, when someone kills someone, you kill them. And then the law, that's pre
Exodus 20.
Sinai, but
yeah.
the law has shown that, throughout all of the Bible.
Yes.
And really even into the New Testament.
Yes.
So
that gets to the next question, which is, so I understand now why you wrote the Catechism. I understand the problems associated with what we're making you need to wrestle with these questions. The next question is, though, how should somebody think of, so what is this, how is this book going to be used by somebody effectively? And what are some of the things that it brings up that you think are maybe not what we would expect to find culturally. Like our culture wouldn't expect this to be what the scriptures say.
Yeah, and I think, so who is it written for? It's written for three people. It's written for the soldier on the front lines. This could have been a 600-page theological treatise on war that a seminary might put in their library for a research paper, right? But what this is written for is the man on the ground who has 20 minutes, right, before his next shift, and he's a Christian, he wants to do devotions or whatever, and he can look at a catechism that is a quick question, a quick answer. Also for that soldier, when people are fielding questions to him, so I'm just going to randomly turn a page, right?
Okay.
And, well, I had that one bookmarked, so that one doesn't count. So, question 25. Is killing in war the same as murder? Answer. Not all killing is murder. Killing someone in the performance of your duties in self-defense or in the defense of a neighbor is not murder. And then the scriptural references given are Genesis 9:6, which we just read, Exodus 20, verse 13, Exodus 22:2, and Psalm 51:14. So it is written in a way where when I have a question or a question is fielded towards me as a Christian or not a Christian, I can come to this and, verse number 15, how should the Christian warfighter view his role in God's overall providence? I mean, so like when we look at that and we just say, I can go through these one by one. And the hope is that this is a collection of questions I personally had, questions that were given to me, and also Chaplain Bryant's questions in the counseling room that we not only answer, but we give scriptural proof. So the soldier's number one. Number two is the chaplain. Now, most people, when they think of a chaplain, they think of two things. They think of every chaplain in the military is a Christian and is going to help you in your faith, or they think every chaplain has capitulated because they work for the government. Those are the two views primarily on chaplains, right? Well, really, there's a middle road. There's about 10% of chaplains in the military are good. I would say that. Every battalion, so obviously that terminology changes via branches, but every battalion level has a chaplain. A chaplain is a ordained minister sent from so like the CREC could have a chaplain, the Southern Baptist Convention could have a chaplain, the PCA has chaplains, the Catholic Church has chaplains. I mean, they are sent from a governing denomination that sends them into the military and meets their requirements. So most chaplains have to have an MDiv. They meet those requirements, and they are responsible for the spiritual temperature of the battalion. A battalion is 600 soldiers. So when you're one guy, all you're dealing with is crisis. So
right.
You're dealing with the crisis questions. We always used to say, right of the boom. The boom happened, now I'm in the chaplain's office.
Yeah, right.
So that limits you as to how effective you can be in ministry, right?
Yeah.
If you're a pastor and you're the only pastor of a church of 600 people,
right?
How do you do that? So the chaplain now has the question answer. That number one, he can field these questions, right? The scriptural proof is here, but also he can equip so for me, like I had two really good chaplains who basically said, I don't got to worry about this company because Cooper's there. And they equipped me to be able to be an extension of them, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what helps the chaplain do. He can identify the people who should be in their hands of.
Right.
Then it equips the pastor. And the pastor or lay leader in a church who has someone who's about to join the military in their congregation, or is coming home as a veteran, or their church is right outside a military installation, has a National Guard member in their congregation. This helps you answer the questions that I'll tell you a quick story. I gave a talk about 2 years ago about this before it was published to a group of pastors in the area at the Western New York Reformation Society. And so I gave that talk. It went really well. And I had a pastor come up to me at the next meeting who said, I really appreciate you giving that talk. He said, because 2 weeks ago, I had someone come into my office who said, I'm a veteran about to commit suicide. and I need help. And because of what I did, half of my thing on like the theology of warfare, and then how do we as Christians respond to this, to veterans issues. Because of that talk, he said, if you wouldn't have gave that talk, I wouldn't know what to say. I would have said, go to the VA, which isn't the answer that they want to hear. They're like, I've been to the VA. They gave me a bag of pills. I don't want that anymore.
Right.
I want the truth. And this catechism helps that pastor do that. So the last time one of these was written was Oliver Cromwell in the 1600s.
Wow.
So our hope is, and some of these questions are not, it's not just America military. Like some of this is, what if I get conscripted into an army that does not honor God?
Right.
Like those are some of the questions we wrestle through to help warfighters in their duties, not just in America, but also now, 100 years from now, there's going to have to be updates probably, right?
Right.
And that someone will do.
Yes.
But the hope is that right now this can get in the hands of warfighters and Christians who interact with warfighters to give answers to their deep questions. Because guess what? If you're used to counseling as a pastor, hey, so-and-so's mom died or so-and-so's cat died, now they're in my office crying. And then the next person in your office says, yeah, I witnessed 20 kids get beheaded by the Taliban and we weren't allowed to shoot them. And now I have dreams about it for the rest of my life.
Right.
And then if you're a pastor, you're like, okay, well, my last one was about the cat. Right? And again, that's not to belittle anyone else's problems. It's just the hardest thing you've ever been through is the hardest thing you've ever been through.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's what the catechism is designed to help with. And if someone's to use it, that's the application they're to use it in.
Yeah, and I could see how that would be very helpful for all three of those people that you mentioned. But I'm thinking about my role as a pastor, and then also secondarily as a, maybe not secondarily, but equally as a nurse practitioner, answering common questions that people have, being able to navigate that from a biblical perspective, from a lot of these moral type issues. One brief rabbit trail maybe we could take. Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense for the United States, recently had his confirmation hearing. And a large emphasis, it seemed like, in that confirmation hearing was on whether women should be in combat roles or not. And this is addressed in the Catechism. But what's your take on that? And what would the Catechism say about that?
Yes, I'll read what we wrote. So question 112, should women serve in combat roles? No. It does continue, sorry. Instruments designed by God to nurture and give life should not be turned into instruments of death. Likewise, Scripture has no example of a woman serving in a combat role. While Deborah supported Barak in military leadership, her support was to the judgment and shame of men. And so, our scriptural proofs are Exodus 23:19, 34:26, Deuteronomy 14:21, and 1 Peter 3:7. And so there's another one that we didn't add in here that should be added, and the reference is in Deuteronomy, but it escapes me exactly where it is. It's something that's used about transgenderism. It's a verse that women shouldn't dress and adorn themselves as a man.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
It's either Deuteronomy or Leviticus, but what that actually says in the Hebrew is a warrior's garb.
Yes, that's right.
And so if you're dressing for war and you're a woman, you're doing it wrong. And so for us, the question is simply, in morality, biblical morality, the answer is strictly no, because the Bible says so. In a very practical sense, I was on deployment to Afghanistan. Like I said, we were about to go on an operation. Had a female medic. She was a great medic. She knew exactly what she was doing. When we, she worked in the Role 1, worked in the SOC, and but she really wanted to go out in a combat operation. Like she really wanted to. And I had her, I said, well, if you can drag our machine gunner, who was our biggest dude, 50 meters, I'll let you go out. And she couldn't. And I knew she wouldn't be able to. She was very petite. And she said to me, she's like, that's not fair. You guys couldn't drag him either. So I went over to him with one arm and dragged him, right? And I said, look, this isn't a judgment of your ability as a medic. This is about keeping him alive. Do you want him to come home? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay. Then you'll submit yourself to what you're able to do. Now, fortunately, I didn't have like he-woman who could drag him. But it's a sense of like, this is not your, and this is something I really appreciate about Pete Hegseth, is like, this isn't your DEI project. These are lives. This is men and women who are serving in combat, because that's the way our military is established. And if you can't do that, if you can't actually do your job, I don't care what your skin color is. I don't care where you're from. I don't care if you have a dad or you have a mom. I don't care what your gender is. If you can't do it, you can't go out with us.
Right.
And obviously, as a Christian, morally, I'm objected to it. I think that a society that sends women into combat really shows what they care about human life, right? Now, we make other judgments, like we murder millions of babies a year. So it's like, it shows you what we think about life. But when we send women into combat, and the verses that are put in here from Exodus is you don't boil
a baby goat in its mother's milk.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's that whole concept of like, they're made for life and life-giving, not for death.
It's contrary to nature.
Correct.
And the other passage, I just looked it up, Deuteronomy 22:5, is with male and female clothing. And I think that could be taken in two ways. One, women shouldn't be dressing in the garments of war, which is a male domain. But also, men shouldn't be dressing as women to escape their responsibility. And my opinion is that a lot of what, so if you asked a conservative church, and this is probably one of the biggest things that's floating around Reformed Twitter or X now, is feminism is one of the biggest things that people are fighting against. They're like, feminism is a big problem in the church. My opinion is that, yes, I could see how feminism is a big problem in the church, but I think male abdication is a bigger problem. And the fact that there are not men who are willing to stand up and do their duty, and they're willing to send women out to fight, that is a huge issue. That is so dishonorable. If men were actually willing to do their duty, then the feminism wouldn't be half as potent as it is.
And what's the biggest argument from women pastors when you say the Bible says you shouldn't do it?
Yeah.
It is always, well, show me the man who's doing it.
Right.
And they always say, well, there's no man stepping up, so I have to.
Right.
And really, it's that same concept is used in other things. Now, I find it interesting that our government really wants it. I don't know many women who want it. I think the women who do want it have something to prove, and they usually have a very bad family life, which is why they feel like they have to prove something. It's either I go into combat or I start an OnlyFans, right? I mean, like, that's, I mean, in all honesty, that's like what they're facing, which, brings sorrow to my heart that they're facing that. They feel like they have to prove something to somebody. But that's a society that we've unfortunately erected, that women feel like they have to go and get shot at to feel like they've contributed to our society. And I think that, I mean, again, this is a much larger conversation, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we've downplayed what motherhood really is.
Right.
And the beauty of a woman. What is true? The beauty of a woman is not that she can take her clothes off. The beauty of a woman is what she can do with what she's provided.
Yes. Yeah, something that I asked in a conversation recently was, if you knew that your son was going to be the next president of the United States, what would you want to be doing to prepare him for that role? That's what women are called to do, because they're actually raising up the next generation of people who are going to be the public servants, the ministers, the warriors, the politicians of the next generation of people. So what they're putting into those people in the household is going to ultimately be translated in what those people are putting out in society. So if that's not a high calling, I don't know what is a high calling. But yeah, that's great. So that's a very tricky modern day topic that the Catechism provides an answer to with proof texts, so that somebody can at least get a starting point of an answer to a common question. So where can somebody pick up a copy of the Catechism?
You can find it in two places. It's published by Wrath and Grace Ministries, which is a ministry that Vodi Bakum is associated with. That's probably where people would find that at. And so Wrath and Grace Ministries, I believe it's on their website. It is on Amazon, though. So if you go on Amazon, hop on there and just click that you want one. And any money that Matt or I would have made off of this book is all donated to helping homeless veterans in Western New York. And
wow.
So if you're looking for another way to support the mission, as we talked about, then that is a way that you can do that, is buy one of these, educate yourself, help warfighters, and then also be helping homeless veterans in Western New York.
And if people wanted to help at the mission, where would they go to do that?
You can go to the NiagaraGospelMission.org, and then everything that you need is on that website. Or you can follow us on Facebook. We are pretty active on our Facebook. So.
And you have a mailing list for some people too as well, right?
Yeah, if you want to be on our email list, we send out a monthly email, prayer request, and you may have gotten a piece of mail from us that says, "Give us money, please." But yeah, that's another place you can find us.
Have you sent a copy of this to Pete Hegseth yet?
No, because I know that if I send it to the Department of Defense, it probably won't get to him. And so if there's a way, if anyone listening to this is like, yo, I know Pete.
I happen to be in the denomination that he's a member of.
That's true. Well, if you could get a copy of this into his hands, our goal with this, if you were to say, John, what would just, tickle you pink that could happen out of this? It would be that this is accessible to warfighters as early as basic training. Having the current Secretary of Defense, having him endorse this in some way, maybe not verbally, but just saying, like, look, this is something warfighters need.
It's a
resource available to them in chapels. There's daily breads, so why can't there be this, right?
Right.
That actually speaks to the issues that a warfighter is going to go through. That's what we want to do. We want to make this accessible. I'm working right now on a devotional that's based off of this that could get into the hands of a guy in basic training or a guy on deployment, where he has a devotional where it's day one is question one, right? And then adding in things about fear, things about, watching some of it's in there, but like things about watching your buddy's face get blown off. Like, how do you deal with that trauma and help others that are around you? So,
yeah, well, thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show with us. Do you have any parting comments you want to leave us with?
No, one thing I did tease. How do you love someone and shoot them in the face?
Okay, yeah.
And so
maybe answer that question.
I will answer that question because it is one that I get most often from the Warfighter Catechism and from my current employment or my former employment. And so how can a Christian warfighter love his enemy yet kill him?
What question number is it?
Question number 37.
Okay.
And so the answer is, it seems like a contradiction to love your enemy yet kill him. The Christian must understand that the enemy is not the only neighbor he is to love. Loving my enemy may mean killing the enemy of my neighbor. Man is also judged according to his deeds in the last day. Killing your enemy may stop him from adding more judgment upon himself. And the scriptural proofs that are given are Proverbs 16:4, Proverbs 24:11, Mark 12:31, and Revelation 20:12-13. If you think, man, that's really crazy, John, how did you come up with this? This is a modern wording of really what Augustine said. He said the same thing. So this is this is historic, and we don't want to say we come up with anything new, right?
Yes.
This is, Christians have been wrestling through this, and unfortunately for the past couple hundred years, it seems as if that Christians have kind of backed away from actually wrestling through these problems.